Oh hell, YouTube. This ought to be fun. There are plenty of reasons for me not to make this video, and yet here I am. Let me just state at the outset that I actually don't hate anyone. At all. There are people whose behaviour I disapprove of, but I don't know too many of them personally, and in 100% of the cases where I do, I have a different perspective. So for anyone who wishes to denounce me using broad brush terms, well, the world is not as black and white as you think. I want to keep this succinct, so it will take the form of a bullet point list. I will give a yes or a no, but I will also indicate how strong that yes or no is. And suffice to say, there's a vast amount of detail left out, and I'm aware there's a lot that I do not know, on both sides. So, let's get into it. Can men talk about these issues? Yes. Why? Because the issue is equality, not a transfer of power. The patriarchy was not about men per se, that's just the name we gave it. It was about control, and men had the control. Some equality movements are starting to show some patriarchal tendencies. Are there two biological sexes? Yes, I'm afraid so. I understand that there are a lot of different systems in human development and that the outcomes are not at all strictly binary, but I think the ship has sailed on the nomenclature. There is a specific combination of genetic effects that lead to male or female traits, and this has led to the vast majority of humans who have ever lived being generally one thing or another to a first approximation. This is an important categorization. Should there be a third sex, intersex, to reflect this diversity? I'm going to go with no. I'm going to say there are two extremes and we don't need a third category for the grey area in the middle. Are there more than two genders? Yes, and this is something that has been used to actively oppress people throughout history. This should end immediately. Does anyone have an infinity gauntlet and we can get right on that? Living in a country that is years ahead of the West in transgender equality, if you want this done in a decade, then I think I have some bad news. I hope it doesn't take too much longer than that, though. Are there infinite genders? I mean, kind of, in the sense that the vast majority of people will not register 0 or 100 on many or any of the scales by which we might choose to measure gender. But I don't really see that it helps us to advance equality to go beyond human as a definition. Is it okay for anyone who so desires to transition their body to any other gender? Yes. Oh wait, I mean, yes. Is it okay to get the government to pay for such transitions? Probably yes, but then I am a raving socialist. On the other hand, there does seem to be a tension between claiming that you are a valid individual, however you were born, and changing the way you were born on the welfare state. Most of the transgender people throughout history did not have that option, and they were valid people too. This isn't a hill I want to stand and die on, however. Is it okay for prepubescent children to decide to transition? Not never? Let's be honest, kids are sometimes not clear thinkers, and experimentation and play should not be confused for an enduring identity. On the other hand, the medical profession does still have a largely patriarchal, i.e. controlling, approach to how human physiology ought to be. Should we use more pronouns in English to define gender? Yeah, probably. But I'm going to go ahead and recommend the Thai way here. Lots of choice in first and second person, less so for third person. In fact, let's go full Thai and only have one third person pronoun. Should we all be he's or she's? Seriously, I don't fucking care. Should there be measures of affirmative action? Yes, broadly. This might be in a different form than currently, I really don't know. Those who say that affirmative action is technically against equality of opportunity are technically right, but there is this thing called history, and the only way to accelerate equality of opportunity is to inject new mindsets and worldviews into the environments that they were excluded from. We shouldn't wait for cultural osmosis to do the job. On the other hand, even an injection takes time to work in a big system. Should there be government-mandated pronouns? No, and I'm going to go into this at some length. I think I get it. There are people who, as an example, persist in referring to others by their biological sex regardless of any other factor. So, for example, they would refer to a trans woman as he, no matter how feminine she looks. These people are dicks. And further, I would say that actually appearance is probably the best criteria for assigning pronouns, so I don't really get where they're coming from anyway. But they are not criminals. If someone is persistently and unrepentantly using an unwelcome pronoun to refer to you, you have my full support in upgrading them from dick to asshole, but they are still not a criminal. Even at work or some other hierarchic situation. Yes, it's tough, and the systems that are in place currently don't view all groups in the same way when adjudicating. So we change those systems, but they are the right systems. As stated before, and this is something else I've observed in Thailand, pronouns are just one way that we use of establishing social baselines, and the wrong pronoun is just as useful for that as the right one. Either someone will modify their interactions to fit in with how you refer to yourself, or they won't, and that informs your relationship. Now, if you claim that you just cannot bear to hear the pronoun of your dead gender or your dead name without suffering actual trauma, then I would say that that is for you to make peace with, because the person you are is a product of your whole life, and that will never change. I once met a Katoi who began to transition at around age 8. She told me she always knew from 4 or 5, and then, without any hint of shame or embarrassment, showed me a picture of herself at that age, which she kept in her purse. I'm not going to claim that every Thai transsexual has this relationship with their old gender. I know that's not true, but it was a very interesting conversation. Alright, let's pick up the pace again. Is it okay to be angry at a gender per se? No. Is it okay to actively campaign for unpopular opinions to be suppressed in public forums? No. Which leads us to violently suppressing speech. No, it's not okay, but I get why it's being employed at various levels, because it is frequently employed by all levels of power, even the highest. Mostly by majorities, but it can be used by minorities. Even a filibuster is kind of violently suppressing speech because it's impeding a lawful decision-making process. Ted Cruz reading Green Eggs and Ham in the Senate is one of the most obnoxious things I have ever seen, but so is screaming, air horning, and even filibustering people who just want to have a conversation. Is violence ever the best solution? No. We all know that violence comes in many forms, and it's going to happen again in spite of a simple no. But let's not gaze too deeply into the abyss, huh? Overall though, is identity politics as an idea out of control? I don't think so. There are some concerning noises going on in some places, but there are some concerning noises in the other direction too. And there's still a lot of actual prejudice in the world, right? The last person to be hurt by prejudice has not been hurt yet, and probably hasn't been born yet, which is tragic but literally unavoidable. We can work towards bringing their birth date forward, but let's be mindful of the world we want them to be born into. At the end of the day, I'm just giving an opinion here. I know it comes off as a declaration, but it's really not. I do feel though that I'm incorporating some of the, well, obviously, statements from either side, because they do have them. If you disagree, I would love to hear about it in the comments below. I've tried to be clear and succinct. Please try to do the same, or refer me to any other easily digestible resources that are appropriate. If it isn't completely clear from the rest of the video, I am broadly more to the left than I am to the right. I feel like a lot of the opinions coming from the right on these issues come down to I don't like change, and well, I'm sorry, that's not the world we're living in right now. I know that certain world views have some justification for a strong opinion, but look at the world that we're living in, there's going to need to be some give and take here. But that's a completely different rabbit hole, and I'm going to leave it there for today. Bye for now.